Somewhere behind your eyes right now, someone is reading these words. You call that someone you. You've called it you your whole life without ever once stopping to check the paperwork. But notice something small before we go any further. Notice that you did not choose this sentence. It simply arrived, and something in you received it, turned it into meaning, and is already reaching for the next one. That happened by itself. You didn't do it. It got done, and afterward a feeling arrived that said, I did that. Stay with that for a moment. Not as a trick, not as a riddle to solve and set down. Just stay with it, the way you'd stay with a held breath. Who was reading the first word of this sentence? And is that the same one reading the last word of it? You'll want to answer quickly. Of course it's me, you'll think. Who else would it be? That answer feels so obvious, it barely feels like an answer at all. It feels like the ground. But ground is exactly the thing we never examine, because we're always standing on it, never underneath it, looking up. Here is the strange proposal this hour is going to sit inside of with you. Not that you don't exist, not that none of this matters, or that the person scrolling, sitting, listening right now is some kind of ghost or mistake. You are entirely real. Something is unmistakably here. The question is whether that something is the fixed, continuous, single you that you've been assuming. The same one who was 5 years old, the same one who fell asleep last night, the same one who will finish this sentence. Or whether that continuity is something you're doing, quietly, constantly, the way your eyes fill in the blind spot in your vision without ever telling you a spot was missing. You've read thousands of hours of words in your life, tens of thousands. Somewhere in all of that reading, did you ever once catch the reader in the act? Not the content, not the story, but the one behind the story, the one the story was happening to. Or did you only ever catch the aftermath, the feeling of having read, arriving a half-second late, already wearing the name you? This isn't going to ask you to disappear. It isn't going to ask you to believe anything strange about the universe. It's only going to ask you to look, very plainly, at something you've looked past 10,000 times a day for as long as you've been able to read at all. The one doing the reading. Because here's the thing nobody tells you when you're small and someone is teaching you your letters, sounding out C-A-T with a finger under the word. Nobody tells you that learning to read is also learning to disappear a little, to let the words carry you so completely that you forget for long stretches that anyone is home at all. You've done that tonight already, probably, more than once. You went somewhere in these sentences, and then you came back. Where were you in between? And who came back? Stay a little longer before you answer. You are still here, still breathing, still sitting exactly where you're sitting, feet on the floor or legs folded under you, the small, ordinary miracle of a body holding itself upright without your supervision. Nothing about this is going to take that away from you, but something in you already knows the question underneath the question. You felt it before in smaller doses, in the half-second after someone calls your name in a crowded room and you turn before you've decided to turn. Something answers before you arrive. Something has always already been answering on your behalf your whole life. You've just never had a reason to ask who that is. Tonight, you do. Think about what actually happens when you read, not what it feels like, what actually, physically happens. Your eyes do not slide smoothly across this sentence like a finger drawn along a table. They jump. In small, fast leaps, your eyes skip from point to point along the line, landing, pausing, landing again, skating over most of the words entirely and letting some deeper part of you guess the rest from context, from memory, from expectation. Between each of those landings, there is a gap, a tiny blackout. Your eyes are, quite literally, not seeing anything at all for a portion of every single line you have ever read. You have never noticed this, not once, not in your whole life of reading, because something downstream of the jumping smooths it all into a single, unbroken ribbon of experience. The gaps get erased, the leaps get erased. What you're left with is the feeling of a continuous gaze moving evenly across a page, when what actually happened was a series of small absences stitched together after the fact into something that feels like one long look. Sit with that, because it is not a metaphor yet. It's simply true, and it's happening right now in the muscles around your eyes as you take in this very line. Now hold it up next to the bigger question. What if the felt sense of being one continuous person, the you who started reading this and the you who is reading this, is built the very same way? Not a lie, not a trick, not nothing, but an assembly, a smoothing over, small landings of attention one after another, with gaps in between that never get noticed because nothing is standing there keeping score of the gaps. Think about the version of you that walked in the door tonight, phone in hand, thumb already moving before you'd chosen anything to look for. Think about how quickly that version dissolved into whatever came next, a message, a face, a video, this one. You didn't watch the transition happen. There wasn't a scene where you handed something to the next moment, like a baton passed hand to hand. It just happened, the way the eye jumps and lands and jumps again. And somewhere downstream, a feeling arrived saying, "This has all been me. You are still here. This isn't a disappearing act. You are exactly as present, exactly as real, exactly as capable of setting this down and going to get a glass of water as you were before you started reading." But look honestly. Can you find the seam? Can you locate the exact instant 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago where the you of before was formally handed off to the you of now? Or is there only ever this, a landing, a gap you don't feel because there's no one there to feel it, and then another landing, dressed up afterward in the same name? There's an old habit when you were learning to read aloud in a classroom of following along with your finger or under your breath, sounding out each word so a voice could keep pace with the eyes. Most people grow out of the finger. Almost nobody grows out of the voice. Notice it now. As you take in this sentence, there is very likely a voice reading it to you, somewhere just behind your ears, using something like your own tone, your own rhythm, maybe even a little of your own accent. That voice has been with you since you were 7 or 8 years old, quietly narrating nearly everything you've ever read in silence. You've never questioned it. It feels like simply how reading is done. But whose voice is it? If it's yours, then who is it speaking to? A voice that is you, addressing an audience that is also you, inside a head that supposedly contains only one of you. That's a strange arrangement to have lived inside for 30, 40, 60 years without ever once turning around to look at it directly. Two positions, speaker and listener, occupying what you've always described with total confidence as a single self. Maybe it doesn't trouble you. Maybe it shouldn't. But notice how quickly the mind supplies an explanation the moment you ask. It's just neurons. It's just a subvocalization pattern. It's just how language works. And notice how none of those explanations actually answer the question. They describe the mechanism. They don't say who's listening. Here's another gap worth looking into, close cousin to the last one. The you who began this video, scrolling, restless maybe, half thinking about tomorrow, a little tired around the eyes, is, cell for cell, breath for breath, no longer fully present. Some of the air in your lungs when you clicked play has already been exhaled and replaced. Your blood sugar has shifted. A thought you were midway through chewing on has been quietly abandoned, replaced by this one. If you'd stopped a stranger on the street and described that person from 10 minutes ago in detail, mood, thought, chemistry, posture, and then described you right now, it would not obviously be describing the same entity, and yet you feel, without a flicker of doubt, that you are him or her or continuous with them. Not similar to, not descended from. The same. Where does that certainty come from, if not from a story quietly retold moment to moment, claiming everything that happens under this name as belonging to one owner? You are still here. Nothing has been lost. The room is the same room. Your name still answers when called. This is only an invitation to notice how much of what you call yourself is memory dressed up as presence, a story running just behind the actual instant, insisting again and again that the story and the instant are the same thing. There's a word doing a great deal of work in this piece, and you've barely noticed it, because it is the most familiar word in your language. You. Right now, somewhere, this exact video, these exact sentences, are also playing for someone else. A different room, a different hour maybe, on the other side of the planet. A different set of hands, a different face lit by a different screen. And the words say the same thing to them that they say to you. You. Somewhere behind your eyes right now, someone is reading these words. They will feel, as certainly as you do, that the word is pointing at them. Not at a category, not at an audience. At them, specifically. The one and only reader alive at that instant behind that particular pair of eyes. And they'll be right. And so will you. The word doesn't have room in it for two people, and yet it will seat every single person who ever encounters it, one at a time, with total conviction, as if the chair had been built for them alone. That's worth sitting with. You is not a name. It has no photograph, no fingerprint, no fixed address. It is closer to an empty seat that anyone can sit down in, and the moment they do, it feels, from the inside, like the most personal word there is. Nothing else in language behaves quite like this. My has an owner. His and hers point outward at someone else, easy to hold at arm's length. But you turns and faces whoever's listening, every single time, and convinces them instantly and without argument that the seat was built to their exact shape. Think of every comment ever left under a video like this one. Thousands of people, none of whom will ever meet each other, each one certain in their own private hour that this was somehow speaking directly and only to them. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't unique in being right. The seat doesn't run out. It was never full to begin with, because it was never actually occupied by anyone in particular. It only ever borrows, briefly, whoever happens to be sitting in front of it, the way a doorway isn't shaped like any one person who's ever walked through it, and yet lets each of them through as if it had been cut to fit. Widen it further if you can bear the size of it for a moment. Someone will read this same sentence 5 years from now on a device that doesn't exist yet, in a life you can't picture, and they will be told exactly as you are being told right now, you. Whoever assembles behind their eyes in that future moment will be handed the same word, the same empty chair, and will sit in it with the same total conviction you're sitting in yours right now. That isn't a small thing to notice, but see how gently it can be held. It doesn't erase you. It doesn't make this reading, this exact configuration of attention happening right now in your particular body, any less real or any less yours. It only shows you what the word you was always doing, quietly, this entire time, offering itself new to whoever showed up, never once asking to see identification. There's a shortcut waiting here, and it's worth naming so it doesn't quietly take over the rest of the evening for you. The shortcut goes, so none of this is real, so I'm nobody, so nothing I do matters because the one doing it isn't even really here. That's not where this is pointing, and it's worth being honest about why that version is so tempting. It's tempting because it's dramatic. It offers a kind of relief that costs nothing. If I'm nobody, then nothing is at stake, and if nothing is at stake, I can finally rest. It sounds like freedom. It is actually just exhaustion wearing freedom's clothes. Look at what's actually here instead. Something is reading these words. Something felt the small vertigo a few minutes ago when the question of the eyes jumping gaps was raised. Something is, right now, aware of the weight of a phone in a hand, or the light of a screen against a dim room, or the particular tiredness sitting behind the eyes at this hour. None of that is nothing. None of that is an illusion in the sense of being fake. It is entirely, vividly here. What's being questioned isn't whether something is present. Something is unmistakably present. You don't need a single word of this to prove that to yourself. You can feel it in the pulse in your wrist right now, in the small rise and fall of your own breathing. What's being questioned is only what that presence is. Not is it here, it plainly is. But is it the fixed, continuous, single character you've been quietly assuming, with a history that belongs to it the way a coat belongs to whoever's wearing it? Maybe there really is one unbroken thread running underneath everything, and all of this has only been circling around and pointing at something too close to see. That would be its own kind of remarkable. Or maybe what's here is closer to the reading itself than to the reader, closer to an ongoing event than to a fixed owner of the event. Not nobody, not nothing. Just not shaped the way you assumed. Either way, you're still here, still breathing, still holding whatever you're holding, sitting wherever you're sitting. Nothing about looking closely at this has taken anything away from you. If anything, it's given the moment back some of its weight, because an event, unlike an owner, can't be taken for granted. An event has to be met while it's happening, or it's missed entirely. Now bring it somewhere it actually costs something to bring it. Not the eyes jumping across a page. That was only ever the doorway in. Bring it to whatever you're still carrying from years ago that you haven't put down. Maybe it's something you said to someone in a moment you didn't plan for, that you've replayed hundreds of times since, a version of yourself, sharper or crueler or more frightened than you like to admit, speaking through your mouth on a particular afternoon you'd give a great deal to have back. You've called that moment yours ever since. You've let it define in some quiet corner what kind of person you secretly suspect you are. Or maybe it's the opposite, something done to you a long time ago by someone who was, at the time, entirely certain they were simply being themselves, the same unbroken self they'd always been, incapable of imagining they were anything other than continuous with who they'd be tomorrow. Here's the question worth sitting with gently without rushing to answer it in either direction. The one who said that thing, who did that thing years or decades ago, are they actually still here? Not in memory, not in consequence. In fact, is the exact configuration of attention, mood, fear, and circumstance that produced that moment still assembled anywhere, still operating, still the one being addressed when you replay the scene and feel the old shame rise right on schedule, like a bell that still rings even though the hand that first struck it is nowhere nearby? You've been treating that old self as if it were a debt still on the books, collectible, chargeable to the same account you're currently living in. And in a narrow sense, that isn't wrong. The story of that moment shaped what came after, the way one wave shapes the next without being it. But notice the difference between shaping and being. The old self shaped this one. It is not this one. The eyes that jumped across that particular afternoon and landed on that particular decision are not the eyes reading this sentence right now. This doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo any harm, doesn't excuse anything, doesn't hand you a clean slate to misuse. What it might do, if you let it, is loosen the grip of a very specific and very exhausting habit. The habit of dragging a stranger from years ago into every room you enter now and introducing them as you, then living as if their worst moment were still your permanent address. You are still here, older, different, carrying the residue of that moment the way a shoreline carries the residue of a wave that broke and withdrew long ago, shaped by it, marked by it, but not still at this instant, being struck by it. The wave is gone. What's left is only the shape it left behind, which you are free, slowly, to walk differently. There's an image worth holding here, plain and physical, a photograph of yourself as a child, the kind kept in a drawer or scrolled past in an old folder on a phone. You look at it and say, without a flicker of doubt, that's me. But sit with how strange that claim actually is. That child does not remember most of what you remember, doesn't know most of what you know, wouldn't recognize your face in a mirror as an adult, wouldn't understand your job, your worries, half the words you use now without thinking. If you met that child on the street today as a stranger, you'd have almost nothing in common with them except a birth date and a bone structure slowly rearranged by 30 or 40 years of living. And yet, that's me, said instantly, said with total confidence. What is that claim actually resting on, if not memory? A story retold that stitches the child and the adult together into one uninterrupted line, the same way a felt sense stitches together the gaps between one eye landing and the next into a single, unbroken gaze. Memory is extraordinary at this. It doesn't just record what happened. It builds the very sense that someone was there the whole time to have it happen too. Every night you sleep, and for long stretches of that sleep, there is, by every honest account, nobody home at all. No witness, no story, no continuity, just the body idling in the dark. And every morning, a version of you wakes up and picks the thread back up as if it had never been dropped, filling the gap the same instant way your eyes fill the blind spot, the same instant way your mind fills the blackout between one word landing and the next. You've done this every single night of your life, thousands of small deaths of continuity, thousands of quiet resurrections, and never once has it troubled your sense that you are one person, living one life, start to finish. Maybe that trust is earned. Maybe there really is something underneath the gaps that doesn't sleep even when the body does. Or maybe what you call yourself has simply never needed to be continuous to feel continuous. It only ever needed a good story, told well, told constantly. And you have been telling it without a single day off, since before you could remember telling it at all. None of this needs solving tonight. Let it be strange instead. Let it stay open, the way a question left in a quiet room stays open even after everyone's gone to bed. Come back now to exactly where you are. Not the reasoning, not the questions. Just this. The weight of whatever you're sitting on, the temperature of the air on your skin, the specific, unrepeatable configuration of light in the room around you at this exact hour on this exact night, which has never occurred before in the whole history of the world and will not occur again. Notice that whatever is taking this in right now, this sentence, this pause after it, is not tired the way the story of you might be tired. It has no history to defend. It didn't say the thing you're ashamed of. It didn't fail the promise you're still carrying guilt about. It is simply here, meeting this instant the way water meets whatever shape it's poured into, without argument, without memory of the last container. There is a version of you that is, right now, at this exact second, entirely new. Not reincarnated, not reborn in some grand sense, just structurally, actually new, the way this breath is a new breath and not the one before it. The way this blink, when it comes, will be a new blink and not a continuation of the last one. You don't have to reach for that version. You don't have to earn it or believe your way into it. It's not somewhere else. It is what's reading this word, and this one, and this one. Feel how little weight it's carrying. Feel how it doesn't flinch at the old shame the way the story of you flinches. Because it wasn't there for the thing being flinched at. That doesn't mean the shame isn't real, or that what happened doesn't matter. It only means that what's actually present right now, meeting this sentence, is not the same thing as the account being kept in your name. The account is old. This is not. Stay here for a moment longer than feels necessary. Let the sentence end and don't immediately move to the next one. Notice the small gap that opens up. Notice that nothing falls apart in it. Notice that you're still entirely here on the other side of it, exactly as whole as you were before it opened. That gap has been available this whole time. It's the same gap your eyes cross 1,000 times a page without ever noticing. Tonight you noticed it once. That's enough. You don't need to notice it forever. You just needed to know it was there. Think one more time of the flame passed from one candle to the next at a gathering, the way it's sometimes done. One small fire touched to the wick of another and another, until a whole room is lit. And every flame in that room will tell you, if flames could talk, that they are the same flame that started at the first candle. In a sense, they're right. Something continuous did travel the length of the room. In another sense, they're not. No single flame made the whole journey. Each one burned its own candle for its own stretch, and handed on not itself, but a likeness of itself, bright enough that nobody watching could find the seam. That may be closer to what you are than either of the stories you've been choosing between. Not a single unbroken person carrying an unbroken life from birth to now, and not nothing, not an illusion, not a trick with no one home. Something is being passed. Something is genuinely alight right now reading this. It simply may not be the fixed, singular, permanent character you've been quietly assuming was doing the carrying. And if that's true, look at what it actually frees you from. Not your life, not your name, your history, the people who love the specific shape you've made out of all this. What it frees you from is the exhausting job of having to be at every moment identical to every version of yourself that ever existed under this name. The you who made the mistake, the you who was afraid, the you who hasn't lived up to something yet. You were never actually required to be them. You only ever inherited their shape, the way a shoreline inherits the shape of a wave. You are free, in a way you may not have noticed you needed, to meet this sentence and the one after it and tomorrow, and the version of you that will read something like this in 10 years, as new. Not innocent of everything that came before, just not chained to it the way the old story insisted you were. You are still here. You were always going to still be here. Nothing in any of this asked you to leave. It only asked you to look once, honestly, at the one doing the reading, and to notice that the moment you actually looked, really looked, there wasn't a fixed face staring back so much as a kind of light, freshly lit, meeting this exact word right now for the first time. That's the whole of it. Not an answer, an open hand held out toward something you can only ever check for yourself. One sentence, one breath, one blink at a time. Because the one who would need to check is itself the very thing in question. If something in this quietly opened a door for you tonight, don't let it close without a trace. Write one sentence in the comments, not a summary, a sentence in your own words, the way you'd say it to yourself in the dark. Something like, "The one reading this right now isn't the one who started it, and that's all right." Say it your way. Say the version that's actually true for you tonight in this room at this hour. And if this left something quietly ringing in you, the kind of ringing that doesn't want to stop just yet, there are a few more of these waiting on the screen right now. You don't have to know why you'd choose one over another. Just notice which one your hand moves toward first, without deciding, and follow that. It already knows something you haven't quite said yet.